Cousin Benny coming to you on Sunday the 9th with a look at the week ahead. If we look at the week as a whole and look at where we've come from, we can see first that we bounced nicely at a lower trend line that goes back and a descending pattern inside of this bigger pattern. We had a nice bounce here, volume was decent, and we have a oversold stochastics that is turning. We have fibs that we came down to the 618 nearly, closed back above the 50% and 382, which both look pretty good. And if we zoom out to November, we can see from this low that we continue to hold this trend line. That said, we need to look at a few other things. With this 25% move we've seen since the November bottom, which also coincidentally was a low on the NYMO, as it was on Wednesday, Thursday, we see RSI continuing to bounce and move through the 50% level, and we came down to the trend line but didn't test the 382, which is down here at these lows that we put in April. Now, I like to use the S&P 1500 volume advanced decline percent as an oscillator on the breadth that can be used to identify the trend and monitor market conditions. You can see when we broke above the 20 period, this is 20 period moving average, that we started this nice uptrend in November, and we continued to come down and test it and bounce off of it. We've done the same that we did back here in the beginning of the year, end of December, and we look like we want to get back above this level. So on Monday and the remainder of this week, you want to watch this continue to rise if this is going to play out. Breadth is very important at this point. So that said, what do I see as targets? Well, on the upside, the bullish case is we could very well test these highs that we put in recently. Okay, I have fibs drawn in from the April low to this high. We came down and tested the 618 50% level. Now we're bouncing above the 382. To get back up here would be very possible. In the bearish case, we could turn over and move back down to the 1600 level, which a lot of people are talking about, or even lower, to a 8% drawdown, which would, I believe, off the top of my head, is 1550, something like that. Now we're having a debate in our chat room over at Day Trader Bootcamp between Hugh Carowitz and GTO that which number we'll be looking at. Okay, it's debatable, but the point is that watch for a bounce, watch your breath for a bounce. If you have a bullish case, you want to see breadth moving higher, and if you have a bearish bias, you want to see breadth moving lower this week, absent a catalyst that will push us in either direction. Let's take a look at the sectors for a read. Okay, so you can pause this and look at this later, but for the most part, a number of sectors have bounced, XLI, XLE, XLF, which are more offensive sectors. So you want to see these continuing higher in addition to breadth. So if you're looking for trades, I'll go over that in a few minutes, but I'm looking at some of these sectors for trade setups. Now, if you follow me at all, I trade a setup called the box technique right here at theclosingprint.com. You can come check that out. There's also a video of this technique over on the right side, okay, as well as up here at the top, how to become a better trader. I use the box technique, which is what I'm going to show you right now on the sectors. I find this very convenient. to have this group set up. Now, stepping through these particular sectors, we can see that the box zone here is more of a short setup on the IYR. We see a bounce coming into the box zone. We see descending 30 period and 10 EMA. And for the most part, you could go long in this with it oversold coming into the week. So watch the IYR. Going to the next sector, we have the IYT. We can see we're back above the 30 period, back above the Kirby level, and we have RSI back above 50. Not my favorite sector, but there was decent volume and we're oversold. So if you want to look for some setups in this sector, that would be good too. Going to SMH, the semis, we can see that we're in the zone right here. We have RSI turning back up, tepid volume, and stochastics is pointing lower. So I'm not that enthusiastic about the semis currently. Looking at XPI, the biotech sector, this has been pretty choppy lately, but we are oversold. RSI is bouncing, and we're back above the 10 period EMA. The volume is tepid as well, so keep that in mind. XLB, we're below the 30, below 50 RSI, though we look like we're going to try to punch through that on the materials sector. Decent volume, increasing, and we're oversold. Not my favorite sector, but it looks good. XLE is one of my more favorite sectors. RSI is back above 50. We have price above the 10 EMA, and the Kirby here is tapering off. Pretty oversold over the last 2 weeks. Stochastics is oversold, and we have decent volume. There's some good setups in this sector as well. I'll go over that in a minute. XLF, again a good sector. Really strong bounce off the 50 RSI. Back above the 10. We're in descending channel like we are on the spiders and other sectors. Good volume and a nice oversold crossover on stochastic. XLI, one of my favorite sectors, the industrials. RSI bounced. Again, descending channel. Looks like we want to break out. We're back above the 10 EMA. We have this Kirby level here we have to be concerned about. We're inside this little pocket here. And we have really 2 nice days of volume, and stochastics is oversold and crossing over. XLK technology looks pretty decent. We're still inside of this wedge. RSI did bounce. Remember, SMH is a component of this, or some of those same stocks in this sector. Oversold stochastics. So this looks pretty decent. XLP, as you would expect, a defensive sector, is lagging the others. Not looking for anything here. Had decent volume. Watching the stochastic. XLU, fittingly, is also a defensive sector, and we're down below the 50 period. This is one of the more weak sectors if you want to look for some short setups in this sector on the weaker stocks that are setting up in a box already. You can probably see a little dead cat bounce, but for the most part this looks pretty weak. Volume was decent, and we are oversold. Not something I'd want to trade this week unless I was thinking to do or to take a short. And XLV, healthcare, another defensive sector, just getting back over 50. We have this big Kirby bar that we have to deal with. We had a shooting star on trying to retest on Friday. Alright, so keep that in mind. Stochastics is turning over and giving us a cross to the upside. Looking at NYMO, I pointed out the low that we saw in November before we had that nice 25% run to the highs recently. Well, we took that out and made it all the way down to minus 107.08. this week. So that's a nice indicator. Keep an eye on this as well, because this could very well turn around very quickly in a bearish case. But you want to see this moving higher if you're bullish on the McClellan oscillator. Looking at AGG, the bond stock ratio, this right here is the bond stock ratio relative to the S&P 500. You can see that we continue to be weak on the bonds compared to the S&P. And this is a candlestick chart of the AGG. That's the Barclays Aggregate Bond Fund, by the way. TLT, we can see that the 20-year is down at the lows, almost took out a low. The IEF has essentially moved from resistance to support in the past 6 weeks. So this is something to watch as well going into the week. This is a chart of gold versus the US dollar. We are bouncing around the 130 area on gold, the gold trust shares. So we're going to keep an eye on this going into the week for a possible short if we continue to see weakness. If you look at the daily chart of gold, you can see that there's a bear flag or an ascending wedge, which obviously is a very bearish pattern. So moving along, let's take a look at some setups. Let's go to our free stock charts tab here and type in Spider, SPDR, and then scroll down here. You can see one of our first sectors we want to look at is energy. We'll click on that, and just stepping through these, we can see our setups. Let's zoom out a little bit. You can see EQT Corporation has a nice box setup, had a nice move on Thursday, Friday. I'll be watching along with Advanced Decline and the spiders for continuation, and note the volume. Southwestern Energy is in an ascending wedge pattern with oversold stochastic. Had a nice bar on Friday. NBR, Neighbors Industries, looks pretty decent as well with oversold stochastics. We'll watch the volume. We had a crossover recently after this descending wedge. Broke out, came back down to the 30 period, and set up a box trade. This probably is going to continue higher. HP in a wedge triangle pattern, RRC, Range Resources. HP oversold stochastics, not my favorite chart, but it looks like it's a little shallow cup here, and we could possibly see this upper trend line and these highs in the near future. Newfield Exploration, NFX, we can see we had a crossover here recently in May. Came down, we pretty much held the 30 period. We have a box set up here, stochastics over, so I'd like to see expanding volume for any trade here. A nice little cup building the right side. Cabot Oil and Gas, COG. Halliburton oversold stochastics. After breaking out of a descending wedge, we had a crossover and kind of a sloppy box trade, but we're holding the 50 period, which I don't have on right here. Let's turn on the 50 period. See, we closed above the 50 period, and now we're continuing to move higher. Pioneer Natural Resources, PXD, we can see that again, a descending channel pattern, a crossover, breakout, a move up, first pullback. We had 2 nice green days, and we have an oversold stochastics. This would be chasing here, obviously, but you could use this as a breakout trade if it's on expanding volume, or an anticipatory trade if you want to get in here with a tight stop of say 10% and plan for a breakout of these highs here, which is pretty likely but not guaranteed. EOG, a little bit of a sloppy chart, but you could look at this as a possible break higher out of this descending consolidation pattern here with oversold stochastics. Looking for these recent highs on expanding volume. Schlumberger, you can always, I always find this very interesting when you have these descending patterns where price breaks out, comes back down, and retests that upper trend line breakout area and begins to bounce. We have an oversold stochastics here, and we broke down from the box trade. So these don't always work, but they work better when you have a nice ascending moving average and prices, or when you have a long downtrend and a crossover and a breakout and a change of trend. That can be clearly seen on the stock chart. As we can see, if we look at DDD, remember when I talked about the video that's on my site, we were looking at this in this area here before we got the crossover. So when we got the crossover, that was the first part of the setup. The first pullback was the trade, and then we had this nice move from 31.50 up to 51. So 20 points on a stock in a few weeks is a very decent trade. Right now we're in a range. We did take a trade this week on a box over here with the anticipation that this could break down. We're watching stochastics and we want to see volume increasing. It's likely that we'll probably get back up to this trend line because I do see a big cup and handle pattern here, but this is a little sloppy. So if you're in this trade with me, keep an eye on this particular pattern as well as possibility for some breakdown. I have a 10% stop on this. I continue to move it up from this level here. So as you know, 10% loss, all you need is a 11% gain to erase that bad trade. So I like to keep my stops to 10% for the most part. Back to energy, VLO, Valero, you can see another channel down where we came down and retested oversold stochastics. So it's possible that we're going to continue to bounce here. Oxy looks pretty good. We had a nice pattern here. We came down and retested a couple of times. We continue to move higher. The moving average is moving higher. And we have a little bit of a box here, but some indecision on Friday. So keep that in mind. If we see a nice bar on Monday or Tuesday, might be interesting, but we are overbought. So maybe give this a couple more days. TSO is something Trader Stewie trades. I believe HCPG also looked at it a couple of weeks ago on this nice move higher here. I'm looking at this as a possible box trade, but again, when prices are moving sideways, the signals tend to be more erratic. We are oversold, so keep that in mind. If we see a move higher on Monday, Tuesday, they might be interesting, but keep an eye on this level here, and this resistance level here. Former resistance, still resistance. We could pop back above this on Monday, Tuesday. Peabody continues to be very weak, BTU. Let's look at Spider Energy. Again, we'll just type in SPDR in our free stock charts. We'll go to the sector. Let's look at, you know what, let's look at financials because there's some decent setups in here as well. We saw this oversold bounce. Morgan Stanley had a breakout on Friday. I would be chasing here, obviously. Got a recent crossover, 2 pullbacks. Wait for your next pullback into this zone here for a box trade. Would be interesting. Goldman Sachs, we were talking about in the room on Thursday. This was a box trade. You can see this was a nice hefty gain on expanding volume at this breakout level. So keep an eye on that on Monday. KeyCorp was a trade that we took in the 8s in the room. Had a box trade on Thursday. If you're thinking about trading a breakout trade here, you want to see expanding volume on that breakout. Pretty much a sideways pattern, slightly descending. You can see a breakout on Monday, Tuesday. Watch for expanding volume again. Huntington Bank shares looks pretty decent. Zion, nice little box trade here. We had a crossover after breaking above this pattern. A sideways action. We have oversold stochastics and an anticipatory trade off of this box here on Thursday up to this upper high, and then a breakout on expanding volume would be good. So maybe scale in. Bank of America, box, stochastics, expanding volume. Note the highs here. US Bank Corp, nice volume here. Nice bounce here. Box trade on Wednesday, Thursday. Looking for a breakout trade here now. You want to see, again, to be redundant, you want to see a breakout on expanding volume. So in closing, I just want to share with you a couple of things. A quote from Isaac Asimov. Those of us who think they know everything are a great annoyance to those of us who do. In other words, knowledge is power. And the way I read that quote is, you may think you know everything, but there's a lot of smart people out there. One of those smart people is Hugh Karwitz, who happens to be in our chat room, a very knowledgeable guy, a former UBS joint venture president. He was also at McKinsey & Company. Okay, so thanks to Hugh Karwitz for his weekly summary among all of the entertaining comments he puts in the room at the Day Trader Bootcamp chat room, as well as a few other people, Arthur Hill over at stockcharts.com, GTO, and all the traders in the room over at Day Trader Bootcamp. Come and check out your 2-week free trial and learn from the professionals. Take care. I hope this helps, and we'll see you in the room on Monday.